not a spoiler. The general is Lois Lane's dad.
What a twist!
Because it's kind of like, look who's coming home for dinner. Because they invite him, and he's like, I'm here for Thanksgiving. I'm like, oh my God. Hello, and thank you for checking out the video. I just want to let you know that I not only create content on my YouTube channel, Class in the Glass, but I'm also on Twitch, where I review movies, cartoons, and TV shows live, while also playing single-player games and multiplayer games. I also have a Patreon, where subscribers have access to hundreds of video and audio commentaries for films and cartoons, as well as podcasts and videocasts. In the meantime, thank you again for watching. Enjoy the video. We're going to move on to the next part of my show today, and I'm actually very happy to talk about my adventures with Superman, episodes 9 and 10, both the penultimate and the ultimate, the finale of Season 1. And I'm very, very hopeful that they're going to be doing more seasons in the future for this show, because I've been reviewing this for the last several weeks, chat. And you guys already know that I'm a huge fan of this show. You know, it's been so nice to see the return of a morally righteous, kind-hearted Superman. You know, we've had to endure a decade of where that was not always the case, certainly theatrically. And to see that return, you know, at the very least on television, and is, you know, obviously of Superman and Lois, and then an animation, you know, of My Adventures with Superman has been enormously welcomed by me, you know, because I've grown up a huge Superman fan, being introduced to the character, obviously in Superman the Animated Series, and reading the comics and watching a number of the films, and you know, seeing it, you know, get to this point here with this new interpretation of the character. You know, it's been great. I absolutely love this show. And, you know, again, for those that don't know, the general synopsis of these 2 episodes of 9 and 10, you know, in episode 9, Superman is being interrogated by the mysterious general in Task Force X, and the city of Metropolis is rallying behind its suffering hero. And then later on in episode 10, during a Thanksgiving between the families of Clark Kent and Lois Lane, a major reveal ends in a serious and dramatic conflict. You know, I've gotten some people like that have pushed back, or a number of people have pushed back on this show. Some people are just like, they outright hate it because it's not like, you know, Zack Snyder's Superman. But there's other people that are just like, hey, I don't like that this show is so wholesome, or it's so lighthearted, or whatever. And the thing is, like, I would actually, because those people probably stop watching after a period of time. And I would tell those people, like, hey, keep watching. Because I would say in the last, certainly 4, I would even argue the last 5 episodes, they have gotten into some darker material, you know, dramatic and darker material. And I would say, like, this is how you do dark Superman stories. You know, it doesn't involve Clark Kent, Superman, Kal-El. It doesn't involve him being edgy or apathetic or psychotic in some cases. But instead, in these last few episodes, and certainly these last 2, it shows how even at his lowest point, and he does hit some very low points in this series, that Superman can still be a source of hope for so many people around him, even when he is in trouble. Like, you know, in episode 9, we see where he is being horrifically tortured and interrogated by Task Force X, by the General, by Amanda Waller. And I think that's even like how a lot of the like that episode like initially opens up, where they have him contained after losing the battle against Task Force X. And it's like, I think so often, like when we think of Superman, he's like a godlike being, you know, he can do anything. And this show is certainly kind of leaned away from that, where he is not, you know, as powerful as we've often seen him in the movies or even other animated shows like the DCAU version. This is a much more grounded, more weaker Superman. It's like, yeah, he has his abilities, he has flight and everything, but he's also getting his new abilities too, like super hearing and X-ray vision. He's kind of like, whoa, he's trying to figure out how to use it. But I like that in this episode, it really hammers home the fact that he's still a kid. You know, he's like, I mean, like what, just like in his early 20s. I think he's like, what, 22 years old. And he's still like so many of us, you know, even now, like, you know, we're still trying to figure out, you know, our lives. And like, he's still trying to figure out his life, but he has like these amazing powers. And the one thing, it's so funny, like the one thing that he chooses to do with them is to constantly help people. But now he finds himself in a situation where It seems like a contingent of Metropolis is turned against him, and he's being hunted by these people for no reason, and he's being aggressively interrogated. And even like the general is basically berating him, saying like, "This is what happened 22 years ago. I don't want it to happen again." Like this would-be invasion, right? That was somehow prevented. And Superman is just absorbing this. We don't even see his eyes. Like, he's so downcast. He's just looking down at the ground. And when because the general's like, you know, what was that? Who are you? What's going on? Where are you from? And like Clark like looks up at him, and he's crying. And he's like, I don't know. I don't know where I'm from. I don't know why my people sent me here. I have no idea what's going on. And it's to me, it's almost like what Zack Snyder tried to do with that now infamous scene of Batman trying to kill Clark, but then, you know, Clark's like, "Save Martha." But in here it's like the writers didn't think of like, you know, some stupid thing like, you know, their moms both have the same name and they can relate to each other. It's like, no, what they did here was the general, who has always assumed that Superman was this alien entity and that he is not as kind as he's portraying himself. Now that he's seeing him completely broken down and crying, he's looking at a very young 20-something who is completely lost. And he kind of has that realization in that moment. And I think it's handled brilliantly. It's beautiful. And I'm like, this is how you do a scene like that. And where this person who had these preconceived notions for 22 years is now confronted with something where it's the complete opposite. And he's going, "Oh my God, I think I made a mistake." And, you know, there's a whole other aspect to that, clearly, because he also relates it to being a father, because he is a father to a certain character in this show, obviously. But I thought that's how you do that scene. And it's a very dark scene. It's a very dark one. This is an extremely dark episode. Okay, there's some horrifying things that happen in this episode, but that's just the very beginning, right? And then you have, you know, of course, what inevitably happens, you have all these villains together, and they're like, "We gotta get the fuck out of here." Let's instigate the craziest guy among us to free all of us. And of course, that's Dr. Ivo, who is now Parasite, and he's he's quickly going insane, because the only thing that's driving him is that he is so obsessed with Superman, he just wants to kill him, because he blames Superman for becoming a disgusting monster, and he is both you know, inside and out. But, you know, of course, he doesn't want to blame himself because he's too much of a narcissist, and he blames Superman. And so they use that to basically free themselves in this episode, and also Amanda Waller, chat, Manda Panda, what I call her. She is very much the Amanda Waller who is brutal and would go to any lengths at any means to get what she wants, and she does something very foul in this episode that probably resulted in a lot of people dying on her side and innocence. And, you know, we get to like kind of like the big, you know, physical conflict in this episode, which is Superman having to deal with Parasite, who pretty much becomes a kaiju. Like this episode, some people have said like, "I don't like that it's referencing this or that it's inspired by this." Like a lot of this episode, of course, this series has been influenced by anime, right, through and through. I mean, by the designs, by the jokes, sight gags, all that, you know. And I love it for that. I think that's been kind of cool and fun. I like that American animation has continued. I mean, it has for a long time. It actually has a rich history of American animation being absolutely influenced by Japanese animation. I mean, all the way back in the Batman animated series is influenced by anime. People are like, "I don't like this anime." Well, then I guess you fucking hate Batman the animated series, because that show is heavily inspired by anime. But like in this episode, like Parasite pretty much becomes like a kaiju. And there's a lot of references to, and just a lot of just imagery used that is very reminiscent of Evangelion and Attack on Titan, and all that is like really, really cool. And like how that goes, and he becomes like Godzilla at one point. It's kind of terrifying. Also, I would not be shocked if a lot of the creators of the show were, especially the people who made this episode, were big fans of Shin Godzilla, which came out a few years ago. A lot of just influences of Shin Godzilla, especially how it kind of wraps up. I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." I actually like that quite a bit. But even before like the big conflict happens, even when Ivo's trying to kill him, Superman still doesn't want to fight him. Like, he has this thing like, I don't want to fight you. I don't want to hurt you. And Ivo's like, well, I guess I'll just kill you then, since you don't want to fight me. You cheated all that time, and I'm better than you. I've always been better than you. And like the people, the thing that saves, Clark, like he's even himself, it's a combination of several things. One, I love how they've brought in the kids. Like, you have these, I forget what they're called themselves, but it's like Kid Nation News. And they're like being led by this cute little girl named Flip. And she like has her other friends who their own little clubhouse, and she's like a little Lois Lane. She's like a little adorable Lois Lane, which I thought was really cute. And like, she's the one that ends up like finding Clark, and they take care of him. They bring him back to Jimmy and Lois, and they kind of have they basically apologize for what they said to Clark earlier. It's these really nice, emotional, wholesome moments. But the thing, and that helps. But the thing that I think inspires Clark is the city itself, is Metropolis, where Lois and Jimmy and Flip and all these people, they basically broadcast this thing as, parasites pretty much destroying the city. Like saying like what Superman means to them and what he did for them. And, it's Metropolis finally realizing like he's a good person and we have his back. And, what that then does is inspire Superman to engage, Ivo. And it's like, yeah, you get all the action shenanigans that you want from that fight, initially. And, but I love how like even that conflict ends, which is Superman realizing like, I just can't keep punching you. That's just not working. And like, I don't want to get too much in the spoilers, obviously, for the episode itself, but there's a great moment where Clark's he gets his X-ray vision, for the first time in this episode. And he's like kind of freaked out. He doesn't know what he's looking at, but he then peers inside of like the giant kaiju where Dr. Ivo is. And it's very Attack on Titan. It's very Evangelion. It looks really gross. It's like biomechanical. Just the look of his suit is so gross, and I liked it for that. But, there's a moment where Ivo he basically says, it's like, I hate you. You made me a monster. And Superman just says, he's like, Ivo, I didn't do that. You chose to be a monster. And he did. And you thought, like, oh, he's going to kill him. He's going to kill him. But he doesn't kill him. Like, he doesn't kill him. He saves him from himself. And I was like, oh, that was brilliant. Loved how that conflict wrapped up. And it ends on such a wonderful romantic and emotional moment between Lois and Clark, where they truly express their feelings to each other. It's just like, yeah, if you're shipping them, of course you're shipping them, then you're gonna love that moment between them in the episode. But then it kind of ends on another cliffhanger where Jimmy becomes privy to, based on the technology that Lois has from the League of Lois Lanes, which is a very funny episode. Love that episode. Where he learns about the Elseworld Superman, who are evil, the Zack Snyder Supermans, if you will, who are conquerors and murderers, etc. And eventually we get to the next episode, and then, also there's whole falling out between the General and Amanda Waller, and Task Force X, which I think is pretty cool. But then we get to the 10th episode, which is the finale for this season, hopefully season 1, many more seasons afterwards, where it's now Thanksgiving. And we're going back to the Kent homestead for Thanksgiving, and Clark's bringing Lois there for the first time to introduce her to his parents. And I love that. Like, I love how they're handling Jonathan and Martha Kent in this series, because I think they were in episode 1 and 2, and we haven't seen them since. And they brought them back for this, and they're great. I just love how they're kind of doting over Lois, and they're so happy that Clark and Lois are together, and and there's like this really sweet moment where we see just this whole menagerie, this whole just, wall of pictures with Clark when he was a little kid. And you get a sense, like, she Martha basically explains to Lois, is like, when his powers started to come in, when he started getting these abilities, he felt like really awkward, and he isolated himself, and he was sad. And, we were always there for him, and we love him so much, but, we couldn't always, he needed a friend. He needed friends, and he was afraid he'd hurt his would-be friends. And so we're really happy that you and Jimmy are in his life. It's like, oh my God, I love this. I love that. It's just like, oh, and they have the most adorable pictures of like little Clark. And it's funny because like it also calls back to episode 1 where Clark is struggling to get his kite out of the tree. And we basically see like a whole bunch of pictures that are very similar to that, but also some sad ones too, where he spends like a birthday alone. It's just like, oh God, because he doesn't have any friends. So all that's great. And of course you get the big reveal of this is not a spoiler. The general is Lois Lane's dad.
What a twist!
Because it's kind of like, look who's coming home for dinner. Because they invite him, and he's like, I'm here for Thanksgiving. I'm like, oh my God. And so we get like the most awkward moments ever in the series. Because Lois Lane has a strained relationship with her father. Clark obviously has a strained relationship with the general since the general's tried to kill him for 9 episodes. And all that is handled very, very well. I think that's all great. And of course, it devolves to a point where you do have this huge conflict that happens. Where, Clark has to use his powers to save his family and people there trying to hurt him. And you get some just wonderful and beautiful moments. And also the music in this episode is phenomenal. Like it starts with like this nightmare sequence in the beginning, right? Of Clark fearing what his people are and everything and how that can destroy the family that he has and Lois and Jimmy. And I was like, oh my God. And the music they play is awesome. And that's kind of like Clark's fear, despite it being Thanksgiving and him having like wanting to have fun. He's still afraid of what he is, right? And so it's constantly on his mind. But like how this episode kind of wraps up is him dealing with something from his past that looks like it's about to lead to the destruction of his family and possibly the end of the world. Which is really cool. It goes from like this very wholesome kind of like, oh, it's like an awkward family. It's got to meet meet the parents. Right? To like, oh my God, there's going to be an alien invasion. And how that wraps up, I think, is quite good. And it's also a great arc, I think, for General Lane and him coming to terms of what he's been doing, what he's believed for the last 22 years and how he has been as a father to Lois. All that's handled very well. And also some good stuff for Jimmy too. Like there's this running gag because he's like this conspiracy theorist, and he runs this like account on like basically whatever the YouTube equivalent of that world is, and various social media called Flamebird. And it's always been like, oh, that's funny, Jimmy. That's great. But like throughout the series, Flamebird is becoming more and more and more successful, like very quickly, and they end that whole Flamebird arc, if you will, with a gag. It's like, holy shit, it's actually like really cool. Then I'm like, well, that's gonna change some things for our characters and certainly for Jimmy. Let's just say Jimmy's become very successful. That's all I'll say. Also, this has an amazing cliffhanger that sets up season 2. It sets up 2 characters. And all I'll say is I love how they end it. Oh, I want to tell you what it is, but I also don't. All I'll say is that the final line is spoken by an individual who is an enemy of Superman, and it is a incredibly iconic line. And I was like, they didn't have to say his name, they didn't have to show his face, but they say it. I'm just like, nice. And they introduced a character. I was like, oh, this character serving this character, which I thought was like really cool and very imaginative. It's kind of like almost the inverse of the DCAU's Krypton. And I was like, that's interesting. That's interesting. But yeah, I love the show. These last several episodes have been absolutely amazing. It is, again, I think if some people I think they might have misjudged it because maybe they didn't like the aesthetic or kind of, it starts out too cutesy or too slice of life. Believe me, it gets to the main story and character arcs very quickly after that. All right. And they do some stuff with Superman that is very mature. Again, they tell dark storylines that don't come across as edgy or apathetic or anything like that, right? It's like, no, this is how you can tell dark storylines of Superman. And it's like, it is dark, but it's very mature. It's not immature. And I loved it for that. And I'm hoping, because they definitely end on a huge cliffhanger here and set up for season 2. And there's other characters too, which, we clearly have, like, we're setting up Lex Luthor as well. And we introduce the character of Alex. And they say his name like 1,000 times, Alex. And it's like, that's clearly Lex Luthor. So there's a lot they're building towards in the second season. And I also come down to this. I do hope, I said this during my video commentary, which will be available on my Patreon soon. It might already be by the time you watch this. But I really want them to create a new DCAU. And because I don't think we're ever going to go back to that DCAU. I've kind of had to put that to bed based on a number of factors, certainly, tragically with the passing of a number of individuals who provide voices for that universe. But you have the opportunity to do something new, and you can use this show as a springboard to another DC animated universe, much in the same way that Batman the Animated Series was a springboard for the DCAU that led to Superman and Batman Beyond and Justice League and Static Shock, right? You can do that here too. And I really hope they do. I don't know with Warner Brothers the way it is. It's in such a weird, awful place right now, to be honest. And also, there's the other thing about it too that has me concerned. This is something even though I like James Gunn, like James Gunn has said, like all animated projects will also be connected to the My DC universe. So does that mean My vs. Superman is not going to happen anymore? Does that mean it's done? Like I have concerns about that because I want this to continue on. I don't like the idea of I think hey, you want to do all your movies are in one universe? That's fine. I mean I still want them to do kind of like the Elseworlds too, like the Batman Joker. I mean I think that's fun, but. Once you start like, all our video games and all of our animated shows are gonna be in the universe, I'm like, I don't think you realize like how difficult that's gonna be to do that. All our books, all our I wouldn't do that. Let these other things be able to do what they want to do in these different mediums, because then you can have more freedom and it's more fresh. Because everything's fucking connected, then that's gonna get very, very difficult very quickly. Because eventually, what's gonna happen is they won't inevitably be connected, and there'll be lost opportunities then. So I hope that's not the direction they go in. Because I don't know if James Gunn has seen My vs. Superman. I would actually hope he is. I hope he did. Because I feel like a lot of what he wants for his Superman movie is clearly what this show is doing. So we'll inevitably see. But at the end of the day, I think this is a great show. I think this is a wonderful interpretation of Superman. I think it's refreshing. It's something that we've needed for over a decade for the character. And I'm very excited for a second season if we do get it. I don't know if that's confirmed. But I certainly hope it is. But yeah, that's my opinion, my review on My vs. Superman. I do hope you enjoy it, and I do hope you enjoyed the show. But what about you guys? What did you think about these last 2 episodes and just of the entire season of My vs. Superman? Let me know. I hope everyone enjoyed the video, and I want to take the time to tell you about my Patreon, Class in the Glass, which offers hundreds of film commentaries and video reactions to numerous movies, TV shows, and cartoons. If you're a fan of shows like Batman the Animated Series and Avatar: The Last Airbender, or films like Aliens and Raiders of the Lost Ark, my Patreon is the platform for you. Currently, I'm doing a subathon to reach 75 subs on the platform. If we hit 75 subs, we'll be able to start voting on the next edited YouTube reaction, which will include actual clips and scenes from the movies and shows I comment over. Choose from such films as Fire and Ice, Masters of the Universe, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie, Mortal Kombat Annihilation, or Spawn. Subscribing at any tier level is appreciated, and feel free to give feedback at any time. Thank you again for watching the video, and see you next time.